Right now I'm at one of the busiest railway stations in Europe, Gare du Nord in Paris. This monumental railway station was opened in 1864 off the momentum of the Industrial Revolution, during what would later become known as the Great Railroads era in Europe. At this time, the Industrial Revolution was booming, and European countries like Germany, France, Italy, and Russia expanded their railways massively. It was 500 miles north of this station, and 34 years earlier, however, when the first ever public passenger railway line opened in Europe. The first of many railways that would change the landscape of the European continent forever. This is British engineer George Stephenson, often referred to as the father of railways. He was a mechanic's son who became skillful at operating Newcomen engines, steam-powered cylinders used primarily to pump water out of mines. While working as an engine wright at Killingworth Colliery, Stephenson took an interest in the engine designs of John Blenkinsop, and eventually improved upon them to design the Blücher in 1814, a much more efficient engine that redirected steam from the cylinders through the chimney. This design established the locomotive as a practical option and was a launching pad for Stephenson's involvement in early railroad development. Fast forward to 1830, when, with Stephenson's guidance, the Liverpool and Manchester Railway opened, along with Crown Street Railway Station. This was the world's first modern intercity railway and the first to rely solely on steam-powered locomotives, a milestone made possible by Stephenson's innovative steam engine design, Rocket, which he developed with his son. The success of the Liverpool and Manchester line helped spark the rapid spread of railways throughout Britain, Europe, and North America, with George Stephenson at the helm. The construction of this railway also pioneered the standardization of the rail gauge, a legacy that still stands today. This is the gauge, the distance between these two rails. Stephenson used this standard gauge, later called the Stephenson gauge, for the Liverpool and Manchester line to minimize binding on curves. And with Stephenson's extensive involvement in future railway projects, it became the standard not only in Great Britain, but also throughout many parts of Europe. The first railways in Great Britain were built with little to no involvement from the state. In Europe too, railways were adopted by the private sector. This was largely because many governments couldn't see the opportunity beyond the large economic cost. Belgium was one of the exceptions, and exemplified the inherent role railways would play in geopolitics. The Belgian government was very forward-thinking, and after Great Britain, Belgium was the second European country to build a railway. The government saw great economic opportunity in developing a national rail system after their recent independence from Holland in 1830. The railways helped bring Belgium out of its post-revolution recession, and in 1835, Belgium completed its first railway with a route between northern Brussels and Mechelen. This was also the first railway in continental Europe. Back in France, a complicated relationship formed between the government and private railway companies. Up until 1842, the government didn't accept any major railway projects. In 1842, they adopted a plan in which the government provided subsidies for these companies to connect Paris to other major cities via railway, under the government's strict control. Even though this helped establish France's railway network, it wasn't the most efficient strategy, since the lines only ran from Paris and not between other cities. Some say this plan was not built for efficiency, but rather for a cultural and political purpose. Today, here in Paris, there are 7 different stations, 6 of which were built between 1800 and 1900. Back in the 1800s and early 1900s, these stations and lines were built by those private companies. They competed for business, and some routes were even duplicated. This was commonplace across most of Europe and Great Britain. One of the products of this highly competitive environment was the opulence of railway stations like Gare du Nord, built largely to display the brilliance of the companies that built them, to impress both the public and investors. If you look around these railway stations, they're often tourist attractions in themselves, the grand buildings featuring great examples of architecture and design. After all, these railway stations offer the traveller their first impression of a place, so a grand building would only start the trip with awe and wonder. The expansion of Europe's railways didn't just change how people travelled, it helped create modern tourism as we know it. And if you love traveling with that old world VIP feeling, today's sponsor is worth checking out. Founders Card isn't a credit card. It's a premium membership program for entrepreneurs and frequent travelers that gives you insider pricing and exclusive benefits, often better than regular credit card perks. Members enjoy hotel upgrades, rates up to 70% off at luxury properties, discounts with 18 major airlines, plus deals on rental cars, cruises, and airport services. And you can still pay with your preferred credit card to earn those points. You can try over 200 benefits completely free for 1 year using the link below and code BrightTripVIP. You'll also have the chance to upgrade to full elite membership for 70% off your first week. Just visit founderscard.com/BrightTripVIP or click the link in the description. Now, back to the video. So, as the shockwave of George Stephenson's innovation rippled throughout Europe, each country in turn adopted this new mode of transport. And the spread of new railways showed no sign of stopping. As the landscape of travel changed, so did that of commerce, society, people's perception of distance, and even time. This map shows how many railways there were in Europe in the 1840s. There are many short sections of railway that illustrate how planning was individualized. By 1843, the first cross-border railway was built between Brussels in Belgium and Cologne, in what was then called Prussia. Only a few decades earlier, this sort of journey would have looked a lot different. People's primary modes of transport were mostly limited to walking or using horses. Walking to work and transporting goods took time. And quite suddenly, it all changed. For example, a journey between Paris and St. Petersburg overland would have taken at least 20 days in 1800. But by 1900, when a continuous railway had been constructed, it would take just 13 hours. And as the railways grew, European governments slowly began to realize their potential. As with distance, time also changed. Up until the early 19th century, each town had its own time zone that was tracked by the movement of the sun. Now that it was possible to travel quickly between towns and cities, the previously used local time zones caused confusion among passengers and problems with railway schedules. So, as a solution, the railways gave us standard time as we know it today. In 1840, the Great Western Railway of Britain adopted Greenwich Mean Time, and over time, the rest of the world followed suit. Unfortunately, there is a dark side to this story. Even though the railways brought great opportunity and helped connect people in new ways, they were also used to divide. In time, they naturally played unfortunate parts in war and became a tool of geostrategy. During World Wars I and II, the railways were used to transport troops to the front line as well as to supply them with food and weapons. This station, Gare d'Austerlitz, was actually named after a war, the Battle of Austerlitz, which was a great victory for France. But it was also a station that was used in World War II, from which children were evacuated and Jewish people were taken to internment camps. At the time, the railways almost became a symbol of war and destruction in Europe. Apart from their direct roles in the wars through mobilization, the railways continued to affect the landscape of Europe through changes in borders. Some railways had to be adapted or destroyed because of border controls. For example, as World War I came to an end, one of the strangest impacts of the railways on a border happened here, where Belgium and Germany meet. There is a very thin sliver of Belgian land with 5 different exclaves of German land on either side. In the late 1800s, this whole area was actually German land, and in 1882, the Germans started building a railway called the Vennbahn between Aachen in Germany and Trivierge in Luxembourg. So the line was completely German-made and German-owned, with no influence from Belgium. However, after the devastation of World War I, Germany signed the Treaty of Versailles, where they gave away land to other states, including Belgium. As the Vennbahn was now mostly in Belgium, it became Belgian-owned, despite Germany's protests. And so the parts of the line that entered Germany were also given to Belgium, forming this weird border that we still see today. Even though the railway line no longer exists and has now been replaced with a cycling and walking path, Belgium still owns this land. Apart from the resources spent on adapting to these new borders, railway infrastructure and policy faced many obstacles in the post-war period. Infrastructure had to be changed and damages repaired. Some countries essentially had to start again from scratch, taking the opportunity to modernise their railway systems. The wars also had a drastic impact on railway funding and upkeep, which motioned some railways into moving out of the private sector. Railways were then fostering a new identity as a means of rebuilding a new hope. For example, this is the Harlequin train, which began riding the Italian railways in 1960. This train signalled a rebirth after the destruction left behind by World War II. However, around the 1960s, many railways were also struggling. Other forms of transport were taking over. Planes were covering quick, long-distance travel, and road travel had also become very popular. Train travel in Europe needed a new competitive edge. In 1964, Japan introduced a new concept, the high-speed train. The bullet train, or Shinkansen as we call it, had a top speed of 130 miles an hour, about 210 kilometers per hour. And several countries in Europe, France, Germany, Italy, were quick to begin the construction of their own high-speed railways to ease the growing traffic congestion in major cities and also to revitalise the rail industry. And what better way to compete with planes than being advertised as an aircraft on rails? Since World War II, Europe continuously became more open with liberty of travel. The adoption of the Schengen Agreement, signed on June 14, 1985, near the town of Schengen in Luxembourg, was pivotal in this motion. The Schengen Agreement made international train travel much more practical as it abolished stops at borders for passport checks. So, this is how train travel in Europe became what it is today.